Hey everybody, doing a little project on the 2009 Honda Accord that I have, and hadn't made a video for something like this in a while. Figured I'd do it, see if I could help some people out. So I've already started on one side. I'll keep things rolling as I progress, but first thing to do, obviously when you're jacking and lifting it up, is you want to find a good jack point, and you just put that on there. That way you don't damage your frame. And then once it's up, put your jack stand there and lower it down, and that secures it. Make sure your wheel is off the ground. And then we'll take the wheel off. That's step one. So I got to thinking maybe I should have told somebody the basics about taking the wheel off too. Number one, before the last number one, is if you decide to do this on your own, I'm not liable. If you get stuck, don't take my word for anything. You're responsible for your own actions and what you do. So don't blame me if you screw it up. That being said, wheels, lug nuts, lefty loosey, righty tighty. So always remember that. Lefty loosey, righty tighty. You don't want to strip them. Make sure you have the right size on your lug nuts, because if they're too big and you try to spin them, you'll strip them, and then you'll end up with a whole big issue. You'll probably have to take it to a car shop. Something else, the size on here is not standard in most sets for the lug nuts. So if you don't have a wrench or a tire iron or the right size, I don't know what it is. I think it's maybe an 18 or a 19, something like that. I have found that my 3/4 will work, but that's not what you're supposed to use. Just saying. And then when you put the wheel back on, in case I forget later, best rule of thumb is when you tighten your lug nuts back on, you want to tighten them in a, make sure you know your torque pounds. I don't know with Hondas, it's 70, 80, 90, 100 foot torque pounds, something like that. But make sure you, when you tighten them, you do them a star pattern. So you'd want to tighten this one, then this one, then this one, then this one, and then this one. Something along those lines. The reason you do that is it will help prevent your rotors from actually warping during regular brake use. So I'm going to take this wheel off and we'll get going. Alright, so we've got our wheel off. I've already done everything on this one, so hopefully it makes it a little bit easier. But if you're just doing brake pads, that doesn't include the rotors. If you're just doing brake pads, you're going to have a size 14, and you're going to have a couple of bolts that look like this, and they're going to come right out of the back. So looking at the wheel, here's your caliper. On the back side is where these go. So size 14 backs those out. And then, make sure you can see this here. This whole piece is basically just going to slide right off. So you can do this one of a couple of ways. And ideally, just resting it up there is probably okay. A lot of the times, depending on what you're working on, that's not an option. Or if you want to be extra secure, sometimes I'll just take a piece of wire or a hanger and just wrap it around and put it through the holes there and just kind of let it hang. You got to make sure that you don't let this hose get crimped or come off or break, or you got to pay real close attention to that, otherwise you're going to end up with a pretty big issue. You're not going to have brakes or fluid. So the brake pads sit right on there like that. And a lot of the times, if you can save these pieces here, you want to keep those little springs or shims or whatever they call them in there, and reuse those, because those are your factory ones. You don't want to have to worry about making them fit and deal with all that jazz. Your brake pad ideally is just going to slide right in there, just like that. That's it. And then on the other side, pay attention to when they come out, and that'll help you know which one goes on which side, because some of them have tabs like this, and you want to, it's like a puzzle. It comes out and it goes back in the way it is. The ones that you get for replacement, 9 times out of 10 should have that same piece. That makes life a little bit easier on you. You can see I worn this one down to metal and just pushed it. So rotors ideally should be resurfaced, which is this part right here. You should take it to a machine shop or a an auto parts store that does resurfacing. It's pretty cheap. It's usually $10 to $20, and they'll cut all that down for you and replace your brake pads. When you go to a dealer or someplace like that, they do that automatically usually when you replace them. But if you're doing it yourself, you can take this rotor off, take it to one of those locations, have them resurface it. Takes a few hours, and then put it back on. You're good to go. I'm not doing that, or you can just replace them, and they're usually not too terribly expensive. But these ones, ideally, I think are probably kind of okay. There's no grooves or worn that are too bad, maybe just a tad, but the pads I bought are just kind of basic, so I got a lifetime guarantee on them, and I'm just going to kind of roll with it. You do want to use Honda pads generally if you can, if you have that option. They don't have Honda pads here where I live, so it wasn't an option for me. But I can take them back. AutoZone, if you go to AutoZone, you can take them back and upgrade. They give you your credit back for what you spent. Ceramic pads are usually the best way to go. And then something else you'll find out, that when you get this caliper off, this cylinder comes out. It's what works with your brake pads. When it comes off, this is not going to go back on like it came off. So what I will typically do is, you got to have, you don't have to have, but a C-clamp helps out really nice. And my boys, who are younger than I am, there's a tool that you can buy that's a little hand crank, and it's pretty inexpensive, but the C-clamps are cheaper and they work better because you get some leverage with this little handle, and you need it. And all you got to do when you put it on there, make sure you can see this okay, is you put it on there right like that. Clamp on the back, seal it in, screw it in, and it pushes it back. Sorry, I wish I had somebody else helping me with the video. And a lot of times you got to get that piece to go right there. So I'll use a piece of wood and put it right up against it, and just, it helps push it in to flatten it on. Then it should slide right back on. Be careful not to damage your boots here on both sides. You'll get, when you're at the store, get you some of the lubricant for replacing these, and they'll give you some, just a little squirt in there, and line it back up, tighten it down. Make sure you tighten those two bolts pretty good. And that is changing a set of brake pads. Now when you're done and you get everything back on, before you go anywhere, put it in the drive, make sure you hit your brake pedal, and let that pressure build back up. That way you've got brakes, otherwise you're going to roll out and you're going to find out yourself in a funny situation potentially. So either way, hope that helps. Change your brake pads, doesn't take too much time. If you got everything you need. If I think of something else, I'll add to it. So I did think of something I just wanted to tell everybody real quick. We were talking about torque pounds when you hook these up. This is a torque wrench, and ideally you want to use it on each one. And then this is how you set it, so you can adjust it to whatever the number is. These are pretty inexpensive at Harbor Freight. You can get one for under 20 bucks, but these are awesome to have for your wheels. They also help make sure your lug nuts don't come off. Another thing was, you know, you can say what you want about Craftsman. We all know what's happened with Craftsman over the years, but for the money, this portable thing, I got it, I think, it was on sale for like $90. I've had it for a couple years. This is pretty much all I use it for, is wheel stuff, but this thing has been awesome. But the best bang for the buck that I've ever found is this little thing from Snap-on. I've had this thing now for 6 years, 5 or 6, and I'm just now replacing my first battery. When I bought it, they gave me 2 of them, but these things are great. They're not as strong as the bigger ones because they're a little bit smaller size, but they're good for getting in tight places. But like I was telling you guys earlier, make sure that when you do this, you go in a star pattern. Then after you do that, that's when you go back around with the torque bar and make sure everything's nice and tight and good to go. And that's it. All right, so just another good example why to use the torque bar. I went back over all my lug nuts and found one that wasn't very tight at all, even though I used the cordless impact. Come to find out the battery was dying, that's why. So if you do have one or you go to get one, I went and set mine to 100 just to be safe. Usually don't need to go much more than that on the imports, but once you set it, hit it, and when you pull, you'll hear a click, and that's how you know you're good. All right, everybody, so hope that helped out. Changing front brake pads, 2009 Honda Accord. Should be the same for 2008 to 11, I think. I think the new body style was in 12, but if you're like me, I love my Honda. I worked for Honda for 6 years. It's a good car, and I can't beat it. And have a great day. Beautiful weather.